1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
There's the crack of the bat and the highlight of my week. It is time to record an episode of the podcast Detroit, City of Champions, aptly named after a trilogy of books written by
Charles Avison.
I'm Jamie Flanagan, and we're just kind of walking through these stories. Charles, it's just always amazing the information that you're able to you've dug up over the years and years. Out of these three books, how many years of research do you think you put into all three of those books?
I would have to say if you add in like the original
your college work,
the college work,
yeah.
I would it's probably overall about 10 years. It's about 10 years.
Wow.
7 for the books, like specifically for the three books, and then the 3 years, it was like 3 months for the thesis, and then maybe a few days or a week for the original little 2-page paper.
Well, and it shows because the pictures that you've dug up and just everything you've put together for this package. Is really cool. If anybody's looking for the books, where do people find the books?
DetroitCityOfChampions.com.
Okay.
Yep. So it's as easy as that. Once you know the title of the book.
Do you have to buy all three, or just can I buy one and ease my way into it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can buy them one at a time. And then there's the set. If you buy the full trilogy.
But, when you buy the bundle, you get some extra little bonus stuff.
Yeah. Well, when you buy the books, the full set, it has all 3 books, and it comes in a case. This really, I like to think it's a pretty nice case.
It is. It's very cool.
And so, but the way I set it up was that each book has its own little promotional items, I guess you say. So the first book comes with bookmarks.
Okay.
The second book comes with the movie that we went over, the Play Ball movie.
Yeah.
And then the third one comes with the box itself. So if you buy them individually, by the time you get to the third one, you actually, the box actually comes with it. So so the other 2 fit into it.
Oh, nice.
And so besides the website, if you're at Partridge Creek Mall in Clinton Township, or 12 Oaks Mall in Novi, there's a store called Inspire Marketplace, and you actually find me in those stores quite a bit. So I do a lot of work inside
It's home
the
away
stores.
from home.
Yeah, in fact, when I did a lot of the work I did for these books in those stores, and I just remember I was so knee deep in the third book because I do a ton of work at these stores because we have I have my own little store inside of the larger store, and so So the third book, when I was I was trying to get it out for Christmas in 2014. And it was it was just this massive rush to get all the photos done and all this different stuff I had to do. And I actually there was 2 nights that I actually, because I was working so much in that mall, I actually slept in the store two nights. I slept in the store in
Security
the back
guards
room.
are like, "What are you doing?"
No, they couldn't see anything.
I know,
but it was better. It was because I had to work at the store the next day.
Sure, better than driving home.
It was better.
Wasting that drive
time. Wasting time, going home, because it was a half-hour drive.
Yeah.
Going home, working on it, sleeping, and then the half-hour drive back the next morning.
Yeah.
And so I would just actually sleep in the store, and then
that is dedication.
Oh yeah. So I'd wake up, and it was basically I was saving an hour. Not having to drive. It was an hour. That's how to the grindstone it was in the last sort of moments of the third book.
Oh man. So, but because we kind of trilogy of books, and then we just move on. We haven't really talked about that much. I like mentioning that once in a while because it's episode 45.
Yeah. So we're on episode 45, and you mentioned this is your favorite day of the week, man. I love it too, Jamie. It's so the greatest thing for me is that for most of this time, for the last I've been doing this now since this has been my bread and butter. This is I have a publishing house called Diomedia Publishing, based in Detroit. And I've been doing this since 2008, 2007 if you want to go to even before the books were done, because writing the first book, I wasn't working when I was doing it. That's all I was doing was writing and working on this, and surviving off of nothing. Mm-hmm. And so for most of that time, whenever I talk about the City of Champions story, it's always starting from the very beginning. It's usually in small fragments that I tell the story when I'm either telling it's always introducing the story to somebody. It's always I get 2 minutes to as a pitch. It's always I'm basically a pitch man. Yeah. And so that's how I sell the books. Or else I've done library. I do a lot of library talks and speeches and stuff like that. And those can go a half hour to an hour. Sure. But again, every single time we start out, it's starting from the beginning, and by the time that hour is over, it's just I've had to glance over every single subject. It'll sometimes something will stand out and people really want to know about some aspect or another. But otherwise, it's usually this. It's just wash, rinse, repeat for 9-10 years. It's telling the same story, and so it's an absolute joy to be able to, say episode 45 and spend the kind of time,
this is
on
the 8th episode about Joe Louis.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
I'm excited.
It's just an absolute joy to be able to really dive into these subjects.
You probably forgot some of this crap. You're like, oh yeah, I forgot that.
Well, I do have to look over it because the first few shows, it kind of annoyed me because because my brain, the way like I've got so many other projects on my plate right now. Right now I'm working on. I kind of allude to this baseball analytics thing. All I do all day long, I do baseball analytics every single day. I do a lot of stock market stuff. I do a lot of crypto stuff, and I do that stuff. Because I'm trying to raise money to do the movie. I'm trying to raise money to do my real goal is to buy my own professional baseball team to do this analytics. And so, introduce something new into the world with this, in essence, Moneyball 2. And so, I spent a lot of time doing all this. And so the first few shows, I'll admit it right here, we had a couple of retractions in the first few shows because I wasn't focused. I'll be honest right now on the show, I wasn't focused on it because my brain is locked into a subject. And this subject, for me, the writing phase of it really did end in 2014. I mean, this is a project that is 7 years old as far as I've been since that point. All I've been doing is baseball analytics, like every single day for all that time, and so so that's what I'm saying. So like first, by no means would I ever forget the story.
Sure,
I mean, the major parts, of course, are just etched in my brain. But I realized after the first 3 shows that this was really my first love, my first entry into this whole sports history, sports analytics world, and so I just owed it kind of reminded me of when I first got started. I'm like, I would have given anything to do a show like this. And so I was like, I just made myself promise, like, you're gonna at least on show day, you're spending the time you need to do to get your notes together and get your facts and figures ready to go, so that I can present this and give this story, the credit that the time and the effort that it's due. I'm the corrections and the going back. Oh, wait, I said the wrong date for this. That really, like I say, that wasn't given this story the attention that I.
So, and the people that have been joining us and are joining us now, if you just find us for the first time or along for the ride, we appreciate you, and make a point to pull over, safely pause your car, and then go to wherever fine podcasts are given away, because they're not sold, they're given away. And like and subscribe, follow us, collect, whatever it might be on your platform. Thanks for being with us and following along. And if you leave a comment wherever you've collected us, that helps immensely. So if you could do that right now, we'd appreciate it. And then that leads us to talking to Joe Louis. And we're in the middle, we're just 3-4 months into 35.
1935, yeah. We're still in the early parts of the year of 35 for Joe.
And already just some amazing stuff. His earnings were in the first 2 months were more than he's made in his lifetime.
In his life,
previous.
I mean, it was staggering amounts.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going from the fight. I have the number. You have the numbers in front of you.
Yeah.
But his first fight was at $35.
Yeah.
His first fight's $35.
Right.
And then it's like $50.
Yeah.
I mean, great. It's a different value for money back in those days. But this it doesn't change the fact that it's still from $30 to $50.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the $4,000 and $6,000. What was the last show we were talking about? He was getting up into $4,300 a fight. His fight against Natty Brown in March of 1935 was $6,500.
Yeah.
I mean, this is his total winnings, $25,000 by March of 1935 is his total winnings. I mean, these are numbers that he may not have ever even thought possible in his life.
Oh yeah.
I mean, a combined total of his life. He never even thought he would see that kind of money.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, he's already. I mean, and we talked about. We talked a lot. We're not going to go over the first 7 parts of the Joe Louis thing.
Right.
But we talked last episode about the idea that. Joe was really, almost like a child of destiny. He found himself in the vortex of all of these powerful forces that, is in the forces being like Mike Jacobs, who is this, he's on the outside looking in from the Madison Square Garden. And he's this incredible. We established a lot of his credentials in the last show, but he's like this incredible boxing promoter.
Yeah,
I mean, this incredible sports promoter that's worked himself up from the ground level, where he started off in what were we talking about, in Hell's Kitchen, New York.
Yeah,
he started off in Hell's Kitchen, New York. I mean, the bottom of the in just at the very bottom, and built himself into a multi-millionaire. I mean, a super rich guy, and was on the and was like, and he was like a student of Tex Rickard. And so, who was the original boxing like super legend? Like he was like sort of the Don King of his era. And so everybody thought that, and Tex Rickard was like only solely responsible for I think it was the fourth incarnation of Madison Square Garden, like when they revamped it and all this. Like that was Tex Rickard that did all that. And so, and everybody thought that Mike Jacobs was going to take over for Tex Rickard when he died, and so, but that wasn't the case. And so it went to. Joe Johnson. The last name was Johnson, but so anyways, Jimmy Johnson. Yeah. And so he went. This control of the Madison Square Garden went to Jimmy Johnson, and Mike Jacobs was on the outside looking in, and he's like, in his mind, like, he was basically robbed from what should have been his next stage in life, which is to run the gardens and run the promotions. And so Mike Jacobs. It finds himself where he's like, well, I'm gonna have the best boxing promoter in the world, regardless if I have the gardens, but I just need myself a super fighter,
right?
And so we also talked about, Rick, specifically this idea of the milk fund for babies, which was just the key thing that the Hearst newspapers were donating. Like they were giving the Madison Square Gardens free coverage for their events, free promotions, and in exchange for money coming from the gate going to Millicent Hearst, which is William Randolph Hearst's wife, to her charity, which is called the Milk Fund for Babies. But when the Garden started losing money in the Depression, and they also had no major boxing draws. I mean, they had heavyweight champions, but there was nothing that was really super,
because the last champion retired, and then nobody really stepped into the limelight.
Gene Tunney retired.
Yeah,
and so it left the belt.
Void,
a void for the so the belt usually a lot of times passes from to the next victor, and then that person loses, and it goes on and so on and so forth.
But with that retirement, it just kind of fizzled.
Exactly. So they had to just kind of do like a round robin tournament style, in essence, in order to figure out who was the next champ. And then the belt did start to pass around a little bit, but none of the fighters that it passed to were really these dynamic like superstars. I mean, they were all stars in their own right. They're some of the most well-known names in boxing, in sports history. You have Max Schmeling, was the guy who took over the belt from Gene Tunney in 1930. You have Jack Sharkey takes over from Schmeling in 32. Primo Carnero, who we're going to get to know very well in the next episode, in 1933. Takes over the belt, and then 1934, Max Baer beats Carnera, and Max Baer, who is the father of Max Baer Jr. from Beverly Hillbillies, who plays Jethro Bodine. It was such a kick for me to find that out when I was writing the early books, because I was a huge Beverly Hillbillies fan, absolutely massive Beverly Hillbillies fan.
Heck yeah!
And so the fact that Max Baer Jr., I'm like, man, this is great. This is his dad is the subject of this story, a major subject. And so, and Max Baer was great. These guys are all great fighters.
He was great. He was a great villain. He was like, if he was WWE,
Max
he'd be
Baer,
one of the villains.
In the quote we read, we were the start. We
just egging the.
He loved to he liked to play the heel. In the wrestling world, they call it the heel.
The heel. There you
which is the guy that the fans all hate. They all like to boo him, and he likes to rile the fans.
But they kind of like it when he wins too.
Yeah, they don't absolutely despise him, but he just plays the guy that they all love to hate kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that was the character that Baer played in the ring. But from all accounts, everybody loved him. I mean, he was a beloved sports figure of his time. But in any case, there was no true mega star in boxing, and so that's and that was another reason why the gate at the Madison Square Garden suffered. And that's why eventually they started cutting back on their donations to the Milk Fund for Babies. Yeah. And the writers of the Hearst newspapers saw this as an opportunity, because they're like, well, we can. So it basically made them free agents because they're not beholden to the Garden anymore because they're not cutting out the Hearst. There's the Hearst charities that are not getting any money, so they're under no obligation to feed the Garden any free promotion anymore.
Right.
So instead of giving the Garden free promotion, this is a chance for them to rewrite the deal, so to speak. And so that's when they connected with Mike Jacobs, and so now the idea is that Mike Jacobs has got this this publicity machine. He just needs the right person to direct this machine towards.
And he finds Joe.
And that's when he starts to hear about Joe. And so we talked about how Jacobs, they had this meeting where all these New York writers came to Detroit.
Right.
They came to watch Joe. They came to watch Joe fight Natty Brown at Olympia at Olympia Stadium. And Joe didn't put up his best fight ever, but it was enough for them for Mike Jacobs to sort of show his wares to these writers and give these guys an idea of who they would be writing about. And so there's this huge. We talked again about this meeting at the it was called the Frog Club in Paradise Valley in Black Bottom, Detroit, where this deal was signed. And the idea for Mike Jacobs at this, the idea that they presented is that Joe, under contract now with Mike Jacobs and of course Joe retained his management group, and so the idea was that the machine needed time to rev up the engine.
Right.
Okay. Like now, so Joe was going to, in essence, travel out to do like a little Western series of fights out west, and in the meantime, these New York writers are going to just ramp up this coverage and say, there's this invincible warrior coming from the West, and he's headed to New York, and when he gets here, he's just going to change the world. This is going to be the greatest thing you've ever seen in your life. Yeah. And so that was the idea. So he's just going to be pounding these guys. He's sort of a little mini bum of the month club for Joe. And so in the meantime, so that was the idea. And so so Joe signs up a deal to fight Carnera in June. And so they like in the meantime, like as they're putting all this together, they knew that they needed a big fight to promote to get for Joe's first rung in the ladder. So Carnera, as we mentioned, was the champion in 1933, the heavyweight champ, and so he's a former heavyweight champion. So it's a great Joe's real first big name fight. Yeah, okay. All these other guys have been fighting. There were names. There was guys that were ranked boxers and that, but nobody that had that was a former heavyweight champion like Carnera. So this fight was signed by Mike Jacobs with Carnera's managers for a fight in June of 1935. And so in the meantime, like right around this same time, Joe buys his mom a house. He's got this money and as Richard Back's book, he says it's the address for the house at 2100 McDougal, and it was a four bedroom brick bungalow, which cost Joe $11,500 for the house. And Joe also made down payments on houses for his sisters, Susie and Emeril, and his brother Pat Brooks Jr. So he made down payments for all of his family. Got houses and set them up because he knew that some big money is about to come in. And he's already made money, of course, but. Now he's got a chance to sort of take care of his family, get them put up in a nice spot, and then now he can continue what is his to unroll this plan. So in April 12th of 1935, Joe wins his 18th consecutive fight against a guy named Roy Laser.
Whoa.
And so this is a knockout in the third round in Chicago. In this fight, Joe basically pays for his mom's house because he gets $11,212 off of this fight.
Wow.
Which dwarfs anything he's ever gotten before.
Oh, yeah, it's almost double what he earned in the last fight, which was a massive number.
Yeah, so this is a massive fight.
And when was this?
So this was April 12th, 1935.
Okay.
And so now Joe is 18-0.
Wow.
And so the next fight after that is April 22nd, 1935, just 10 days later, and Joe's knocks out Biff Bennett. And I was like, there's a couple pictures we've shown. We might have a picture to put up on the screen there of Biff.
Yeah.
It might have even been from a couple weeks ago.
Right. I'll
I was kind of joking with some of my friends about like some of the picture because there's a really ugly looking knockout picture of Biff Bennett, and he's like. Where he's like, we're like, don't get Biff because he's like, legs. It's definitely my book. I think we have it a picture.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
But it might have been from 2 shows ago.
Oh, just the knockouts?
Yeah, there's one where Biff's legs are folded under his, like he's like laying on his back, but his legs are underneath his.
Yeah, there it is.
Rear
is
end.
That it?
Yeah, like.
Oh, that TV's lagging behind. Yeah.
But like we were joke. I was showing my friends this picture and say, man. We were like, don't get biffed, like God, like because he's like unconscious and just looking horrendous. So Joe knocks out Biff Bennett in the first round. Fight lasts a minute and 15 seconds.
Wow.
And so that fight, yeah. So the first fight is in Chicago Stadium, Illinois. The second fight against Biff Bennett, it's in Memorial Hall in Dayton, Ohio. And so he's sort of making his way out west. In this fight, it's a much less amount. Joe, really after that first one against Roy Laser, the second fight, this next one against Biff. So this tour isn't necessarily about Joe making these big gates.
Right.
It's about just knocking people out and creating the ability for these writers to go, man, this next fight he knocked out Biff Bennett in 1 minute and 15 seconds. That's how great he is. So he wanted basically they're looking for some victims.
Right.
They're looking for some victims here.
Oh, geez.
So now Joe is 19-0 and he gets paid. This one's only $750. This fight's only $750. So it's not a major, massive amount. But
20. Who put that in there?
Yeah, throwing that one out. So the next fight is again just 2 weeks after that. So this next one is April 25th, 1935, against a guy named Roscoe Tolles, and this is a TKO in the second round. This is a TKO. I don't have the round knockout, but here's the thing: is in the second round, Roscoe Tolles' side threw in the towel because he was taking such a beating from Joe right off the bat.
Yeah.
So the towel they threw in, and the referee kicked the towel out of the ring. He wouldn't let the fight end.
Yeah.
And so Joe
suck it up, Buttercup.
Suck it up. We want at least one more round of a beating, And so I think he went one more. I don't have it written down here, but it was like I think it was only like one more round, and then Tolles was counted out. Like the referee did stop the fight because he's like, it's getting really ugly. And so, but it's just crazy that like in the second round, Roscoe Tolles' trainers threw the towel in.
Oh my God. And
then the referee kicked it out. He wouldn't let him throw the towel in.
That's too funny.
So that one was in Flint, Michigan.
Right.
And so that fight was in Flint, Michigan. $1,250 Joe got for that fight. But here's the thing: this fight and the next two fights, these don't appear in Joe's fight record. So you actually have to do a little bit of research to dive in to actually read about these. That's why I didn't have the round count out for Roscoe Tolles because it doesn't appear in Joe's record. Like when you look at Joe's total fights, these next three fights are not listed in his record. So Joe stays 19-0 despite the fact that this is his 20th straight victory. So he doesn't even get credit for this on his official record. So and then his 21st total fight is against Willie Davis. It's a rematch of his second fight, or it's a rematch of this is the second time he's faced Willie Davis, and then the previous time was Joe's second ever fight. It was the second fight of Joe's career. We talked about him, which was a TKO in the third round. And this doesn't go much better for Willie Davis. It is a TKO in the second round.
Okay,
and this is in Peoria, Illinois, and it's another $750.
Right.
Gate.
But more great press.
Yeah, but again, the entire time the typewriters are humming in all the Hearst newspapers across the country talking about this incredible fighter, and so the final sort of hype fight. That's why we call this the hype train, because Joe's just on a train headed all over the country knocking people out while the newspapers are hyping people, which is Joe's 22nd actual fight, and Joe's still 19-0 regardless. So his 22nd fight is against a guy named Gene Stanton, which is a knockout in the third round. And this fight in here has always caught my eye because this one was in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from Kalamazoo. Okay, I'm not sure if you were. I live in Detroit now, but I grew up in Kalamazoo. Went to Kalamazoo Hackett High School, and all my friends are from. I have a lot of friends from Kalamazoo, and one or two might be listening now. So, Kalamazoo, it's just such a great town. I love Kalamazoo. I go back there as much as I can. And so it's always cool that Joe Louis's final fight on this hype tour was of all the towns, of all the cities in the world.
All the gin joints and
all the places in the world he could wrap up this hype tour. It was in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I wish I had the venue, but I don't have that. Again, this was another exhibition fight, so there's not too much information on it, at least not that I've found. So this one was in Kalamazoo, and $750, another $750 for Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, and this was on May 7th, 1935. So over the course of this month and a half, a little under a month and a half, these typewriters out there are just humming, right?
Right.
And along the way, they're taking photos. We've got, I know we have a slide. We'll put this slide together.
Yeah.
There's where it's a slide of there's more than just, they're not just hyping up the fact that Joe is this incredible fighter. They're hyping up the fact that Joe is also this all-American good guy.
Right.
So as opposed to
baseball,
because the issue that we began this entire Joe Louis story with was this idea of Jack Johnson and the idea that he had like scandalized, but he was a very divisive and very controversial figure in his day, and it led to this idea that no black man's ever going to get a chance to do what Jack Johnson did.
Yeah.
And so along the way they're trying to they didn't really need to do much work with Joe because he was already this nice, humble, God-fearing guy who loves his mom. He already was those things.
Yeah.
And so, but they wanted to bring that issue out. They wanted to really dramatize that issue to make that so that they're saying like this is the anti-Jack Johnson.
Not only is he steamrolling people in the ring, he's a heck of a nice guy out of it.
Exactly. Okay. They had to make him palatable to the wider sports world.
Curtis said hi. Awesome stuff.
That's
Charles.
my brother. Hey, Curtis, how you doing, man?
Hey.
So they've got to present. So it's not just the mauler inside the ring. Joe's also got to be this. He's got to be like Jack Johnson inside the ring, but totally the opposite of Jack Johnson outside the ring. And that's one of the other things. So the photos that we have in that slide to show,
it's up. That's lagging.
Good. Yeah. So the photos we have in the slide, it shows Joe like playing baseball, and cooking chicken with his mom, and hanging out. There's a bunch more photos. I have a bunch of photos in the book to show, and those are actually from 1935.
Okay.
So those photos, and there's another one where Joe's doing
that's young Joe. That's pretty young Joe.
You can always tell the difference in the Joe Louis shots because the young Joe, he's just smaller. It seems like he's leaner, way, just really it seemed like he really got bigger. Just his body, it's almost like his head got a little bigger too, physically. Yeah. You can always kind of tell like young Joe versus old Joe. Young Joe, he is just you can always just tell. He just, obviously he looks younger, but you can always just kind of see it in these photos.
Yeah.
And the ones I have are from actually 35, like during this whole hyped session where they're trying to get him, they're trying to present him to the public as this, like I say, all-American good guy. So now comes the time for Joe to arrive in New York, to get to New York. And this is just one of the greatest, in the movie, this is like a signature scene.
The steam coming off the train.
Yeah. So I have a scene on the in the screenplay with Joe's arriving in New York, and he's heading out to New York. And so Joe's he wastes no time. This last fight against Gene Stanton in Kalamazoo is on May 7th, and in the middle of May, I don't have the exact date, but in the middle of May, Joe arrives in New York. On this train, and I have a photo of what happens when Joe gets there.
Right. Oh my gosh, they're carrying him.
So Joe doesn't even get off the train.
Are those the porters carrying him?
The porters on the train carry Joe off the train like a king.
And they all look like they're having a ride.
They're all loving it. So when Joe arrives in New York, there is this massive crowd at the train station to greet him. And there's just this mania. There's this Joe Louis mania. This is where this Joe Louis mania, it starts right here. So there is no more, people don't know who Joe Louis is anymore.
Right.
From this moment on, Joe Louis is the sensation, the mania of Joe Louis is going to grow and grow and grow every single day, every single week, every single month. All the way through 1935, especially in 1935, it is very difficult. There is very few athletes who have had this type of a mania that's surrounding them. And when you see the newspapers, when you're actually going, I went through these newspapers every single day.
Yeah.
And you can see it. From the day that Joe arrives in New York, it is Joe Louis every single day. There is article after article in every single paper. It is just, it is non-stop.
So is this in the Detroit paper and the New York papers?
In the country.
Oh, wow.
It's across the country.
Wow.
It's every single paper.
All right.
That's what I'm saying. Joe Louis mania. There's the Hulkamania from the 80s. That was some of my first experience with a mania.
The mania. Okay.
Then there was there's the other sports elements like there was the Fernando mania, Fernando Valenzuela when he first came over.
Sure.
There's this baseball mania where in Detroit we have Mark the Bird Fidrich. That kind of where he's single player just captures people's imagination, and that's all anybody talks about. Like every time that player pitches, the crowds are just packed. Doesn't even matter how good the team is doing. There's a mania about that player. Like Babe Ruth had at least 1 year where there was a mania. For actually probably most of Babe Ruth's career was a mania. But there was a couple years that were more concentrated on that than others. But there's a lot of different cases where there's just like this huge, like I say, a mania that grips the public, and there's just nobody else on the world that they want to hear about or talk about except for Joe, except for that athlete, and that's what Joe was in.
Okay,
and so that's what's so incredible is that here's this guy, to hash back all the way, Buckaloo Mountains of in the shadow of the Buckaloo Mountains of Alabama, who just had nothing and grew up in this, had the most unlikeliest of heroes, and here he is, and he's just, again, there's this mania that surrounds him, and I think for good reason, because a lot of people, there's this American dream that people can rise from obscurity and become this hero to millions, to achieve incredible things. That's like one of the most like American things that there is this dream. Like Abraham Lincoln, like log cabin of the White House, or, a million other examples. But but when a hero does come out from the cherry tree, but when somebody comes out from the the lower ranks, so to speak, and rises to the top, to the pinnacle of that, of the world like that. I think that's really the genesis of that mania. Yeah. They don't go crazy for somebody that started out with all the things that were, all the, attributes born to, like all like money and their silver spoon in their hand and all, and then they did other things. There's usually a mania when it's somebody that people can identify with. Talking about Fernando Valenzuela, it's a perfect example. He came from this nobody ever heard of this town that he came from in Mexico, and then like 2 years later he's pitching for the Dodgers and just like winning every single game. It's like people, I think, really when they that's one of the primary ingredients of these manias is when you have somebody that you can identify with, somebody that comes from from nowhere and then just rise up. So
in 35, we're in the throes of the Depression.
Absolutely.
So I mean, a lot of people are identifying with a rough beginning.
Absolutely. So, and a guy that came out of nowhere. Yep. And another thing to not discount is that Joe Louis, since Jack Johnson again was an incredibly polarizing figure. I read several quotes that were black leaders of the time. I mean, some of these major black leaders at the time that were saying Jack Johnson did tremendous damage for us, for our community. I mean, he did, and that was out of their own mouths. And so now Joe is like I say, he's coming into the situation where he is. Basically, he's becoming universally beloved. So there's no polarization with Joe. There's no controversy. He's just, and that's to say, like, Joe is emerging as the first universally beloved African American superstar. And the first, and this is the guy, like people talk about Jackie Robinson. Jackie, as we're going to see, one of the things we're going to talk to him about the legacy of Joe. There would have been this is Jackie Robinson before Jackie Robinson. So this is Joe set the stage for everything that came after him. So that's in like Jesse Owens in the 1936 Olympics. They're going to be we're going to be showing here in another couple episodes how Jesse Owens might not have even gotten a shot at the 1936 Olympics, except for what they were doing was pairing him with Joe.
Oh, wow.
They were putting him in the same room with Joe. They were staging photos with Joe Louis and Jesse Owens and saying, look, Jesse Owens is friends with Joe Louis. And because of that, that's what imparted some of Joe onto
Give the
Jesse
fella
Owens.
A chance to run.
Exactly. He can do it on the track and field what Joe's doing in the boxing ring. And that's what helped propel Jesse Owens to the opportunity to even be in the 1936 Olympics. And the same thing for Jackie Robinson himself, who is like Jackie Robinson and for good reason. Jackie Robinson is like the man who broke the color barrier in baseball and this and all the obstacles he had overcome, of course. But Jackie Robinson himself said that he would have never have gotten that chance in baseball if Joe had not done his thing in boxing. And of course, it all begins in 1935.
Right. There is May 35 being carried off the train.
Yeah. So Joe, and that's what's so cool is this is that moment where this mania begins.
I love what's encapsulated.
And that's what I'm saying. That photo is so great because it's at that moment that all these other things in the world of American sport, like these other, Jesse Owens and Jackie Robinson, and then everything else, the floodgates being opened thereafter. It all begins right there with that moment that Joe was carried off the train. That's why that photo to me is just so iconic and so important. Because that's that moment, you see, but the 1935 story with Joe Louis a lot of times just gets overlooked and going, 35, he did all these things, and then then let's move on to the next stuff. Let's move on to the Schmeling fight and all this other stuff.
If anybody's listening to the podcast, it is on YouTube and Facebook video versions of it that have these pictures, and of course you could always, like as we mentioned at the top of the show, you can pick up the book.
I got the
I'm
photo
not
in the book.
I'm not schlepping the book. I mean, I've mentioned the book twice in this episode. I don't think I've schlepped the book since.
The crazy thing is you're the one that
Champions Day.
Yeah, you're like
you just get in here. You want to talk about the story.
I don't even.
I'm the one that stops you and try to.
Yeah,
sell
you're the
book.
one stopping me, going, "Hey man, pitch your book. We got a show. We're doing a show here. Like, you should tell people they can buy a book from." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh,
I guess
right.
they can."
And again, like I said, we're just hanging
I got
out.
stuff to sell.
I'm enjoying. I enjoy
that's
doing
me
this.
too. I just love doing it, dude.
So I love how important this picture is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Once you understand that concept, that is at this moment that Joe, and in the screenplay, I wrote a segment in there about Joe riding the train to New York and having no idea what to expect. Right. Where it's kind of calm in the train and it's kind of ho-hum. And then in the screenplay, the way that it's like when Joe pulls into the station, he looks out the window and sees this throng of people. Like that's how I wrote it in the screenplay. He's coming into the station going,
God, you got to wonder what's going through his mind.
Yeah.
Because he's fought in front of big crowds, but to have him on the platform waiting for
that's what I'm trying to say. That's
it's
how
like the Beatles arriving.
Exactly. That's that mania, like a Beatles mania. That's what they called that.
Yeah.
When the Beatles showed up, there's like people are screaming their heads off just for even looking at the Beatles. There's I was watching the Netflix show The Crown the other day, and it was like Princess Diana had a mania when she went to Australia. There was like this huge mania for it. That's what I mean. Like when the astronauts when they landed on the moon, they went to this world tour, and everywhere they went there was a mania. That's like it's what I'm saying. Like Joe, that's why I wrote it in the screenplay. Is Joe's pulling up to the station.
You got to wonder.
He's
what
looking
he was
out the window. Yeah, that's what I mean. I wrote that into the screenplay. I spent a lot of time on this particular scene because it was it was really Joe's transition from his world where he's just making money as an up and coming fighter, and then there's this the second that he arrives in New York, everything changes. He is no longer this sort of up and coming guy, and he's trying to make money for his family.
This is the turning point.
Joe now is at first he's going to be a national. He's a major top figure in the world, not just a sports world, but he is a major figure in just in the national scene. I mean,
what fights do we have lined up?
Nothing.
What is he here in New York for?
He's here to train.
He's here to train. He's just here to train in New York.
He's here, really to drum up extra interest in this fight against Primo Carnera.
Okay, where's that going to take place?
So that's going to be at Yankee Stadium.
Okay,
yes.
All right. So that's in New York. All right.
So it's in New York. So he doesn't have the Madison Square Garden, so we're going to have it at Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
See, so it's going to be a different venue.
All right.
And so anyway, so Joe. So he arrives. He gets carried off the train in this signature moment, and then the next stop is over at there's a big press conference where Mike Jacobs does most of the talking at this press conference. Joe's kind of quiet. They ask him a couple of basic questions, and then they sort of have they take the Joe on this little tour through these entertainment district. They take him to the Harlem Opera House. Where he does a boxing skit with a guy named Dusty Fletcher.
It's like he's as if he was if Saturday Night Live existed, he would have been on Saturday Night Live.
That's exactly the case. Yeah, exactly. And so he does this skit with a guy named Dusty Fletcher.
Yeah.
This boxing skit, and he's doing 4 shows a day for a week. So they're using. I think they're using this as drumming up interest and drumming up this excitement for Joe. And then so so the apartment building he's staying in he's staying at this apartment while he's in New York, and Duke Ellington moves into that apartment building just so he can like be in the same building as Joe.
Get out.
Yeah, so
That's
Joe
fantastic.
meets Duke Ellington, and jazz musician.
I want to meet Duke Ellington.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. Like Joe was attracting these major stars, to come out there that want to just be near. Imagine Joe was reading about Duke Ellington for his, last couple of years, and he's now Duke Ellington. Hey man, I just want to meet you.
You're like, oh my God.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It's just such an incredible time, and that's why I wanted to really put that in the screenplay. And that's what's so important about this year is to focus on this transition of Joe from this up and coming guy into this. It's a whole different world for this guy going forward. Mm-hmm. And so he's just paraded through these high end bars. Another one of these guys he meets is a guy named Bill Bojangles Robinson, who's going to end up doing. I've got photos of him. Joe, he's a dancer, and Joe, I've got pictures of Joe doing these like dances with him a little bit. I got some pictures of him. And so Joe, that's the excitement phase. Yeah. And then things kind of settle down after about, after like a week or so. Settling down is meaning like Joe actually gets to start working on his training. Okay. This is like because his fight with Primo Carnera is coming up for June 25th. That's the scheduled date of the fight. Okay. And so he settles into this camp, and it's called Pompton Lakes. Right. It's in New Jersey. And the idea is that you would have this camp where Joe's going to train every day, right? He's going to do his workouts, his road work, he's going to box all these like sparring partners. And so the sparring partners they got to bring in are these like they're looking for people that are super tall because we're going to show Primo Carnera. I think it was like 6'6". 290-something pounds. Wow. He's just a monster of a man. And so the sparring partners he's got to have are guys that are super tall. Sure. So he's kind of really practice for training to fight against a guy who's going to be taller than him. Yeah. And so anyways, but what's interesting is that what happens that, the Pompton Lakes itself serves as a hype as like a sort of a hype thing for, there's reporters there every day. There's all this stuff going on. And it's like this little village that evolves around just this. There's a boxing ring where Joe trains, and then what it ends up evolving out of. And I've got a great picture, but I wanted to save it for one of the last episodes because when he's training for Max Baer. Okay. But I've actually got a photo. It's in the books, of course. But it's an aerial photo of what the ring that Joe Louis was training in, what it looked like around it. All right, and it's like I guess that's a teaser for a couple episodes from now when we show this photo. Yeah. But it's just like it looks like the actual fight itself. I mean, there's thousands.
And that's just media and fans.
And fans around this ring, and and just watching Joe spar and practice, and it really showed because I wanted to save it for that episode because by that point the mania has gotten so huge. I wanted to show because I don't want to say, oh, this is from the Max Baer fight when we're talking about the Primo Carnera fight. So that's why I do have photos from the Primo fight, which shows it shows Joe training with some photos of people around it. But more specifically, what I have, especially since this is a podcast, is I have a quote that I'm going to read. Yes. This is Bob Murphy walking through of this Pompton Lakes camp and explaining what he's seeing and how he first walks up and what he sees. So this is a tour through Pompton Lakes and as Joe was getting ready for Primo Carnera. And it's just an absolutely, like, this is one of the quotes where the title of the quote is actually burned into my brain. And the name of the quote is called Always Things Doing at Joe Louis's Camp. And again, it's by Bob Murphy, and this article came out on June 22nd, so just a few days before the Primo Carnera fight. So I'm just going to read it in its entirety. And so it's so everybody, it's about 5 paragraphs long, so anybody that needs to pour a drink or sit back, relax or whatever, take a moment to adjust your, whatever you need to adjust and sit back for a minute while you just listen to, this of what the scenery was like for somebody that was walking through this camp, just to, to show how massive this was. So Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, June 22nd. Situated at the heart of the Ramapo Mountains, hard by the peaceful waters of Pompton Lake, Joe Louis' bustling camp is in direct contrast to its placid surroundings. Something is doing every minute. Veteran fight followers say there has never been a fight camp conducted quite like this one. It is the same spot where Jack Sharkey, Primo Carnera, Tony Canzoneri, and others have prepared for important ring jousts, but somehow it remained for the hosts of Harlem to really add to the color. Pompton Lake is 35 miles from New York. Arriving at the camp, you will find your entrance barred by a heavy rope. But long before you reach the rope, you will find it lowered and a dusky gentleman bowing and scraping and showing pearly white teeth as he says, "Come in, sir. You are welcome, sir." So don't ask questions. Don't ask me why the rope is there. They neither ask you who you are or where you came from. Once on the grounds, your time is your own. There before you are wild groups laughing and talking. Everyone is taking everyone else's picture. At the particular time this correspondent arrived, it was 1:30 p.m. A well-groomed, youthful Negro approached me and said, "I'm Joe Lewis's secretary. Is there anything that we can do for you?" I explained, first of all, I would like to talk with John Roxborough. In less time than it takes to tell, I was led to a frame house which housed Lewis, his sparring partners, managers, and whatnots. 2 uniformed state policemen are at the door as you enter, but they don't bother to look you over. They are busy demonstrating the difference between Lewis's dazzling left and the slow, lazy punch Carnera uses. The two officers are practicing on some elderly Negro gentleman who keeps cautioning, "Careful, boss, not too close to the old chin, boss." Roxborough glad. Lewis's secretary produces Roxborough. John immediately makes it known that he is glad someone else has arrived from Detroit. "These other newspaper men are fine," he exclaims, "but it's awful nice to have our Detroit folks. Now you just come in and make yourself at home. Roxborough brings in Julian Black, his Chicago partner, who is half owner of Lewis. Black proves just as polite and equally as intelligent as Roxborough. Then comes another round of introductions. Roxborough's brother from Detroit was there. Black had brought along a few others from Chicago. All these were under the official roof. "Where's Joe?" I inquired. "Come here just a minute," said Roxborough, tiptoeing to the edge of the stairway. "Just listen to that noise." Your correspondent had heard something like it once when we visited our uncle who had a sawmill. Roxborough assured me, however, it was no sawmill, but only Joe Louis snoring. "Sleeps any minute." "I never in my life have seen anything like that boy," said Roxborough. He can fall off to sleep any minute he wants to, and he doesn't wake up until we go after him." Laughter interrupted the remainder of his conversation regarding Joe's sleeping prowess. In the next room, Joe's sisters, Voonies, Eulalia, and Susie, were tinkering with the billiard table. They had somebody behind the 8-ball, judging from the laughter. This hardly had subsided until there came a fierce clawing at the back door. I turned to look into the face of a giant Great Dane dog. "Don't mind him," Roxborough said assuringly. "He's a dog that Betsy Krebs of Chicago loaned us to help out the looks of the camp. That dog and Joe took a liking to one another immediately. I'm wondering if we will be able to separate them." Roxborough decided it was high time he and Black should move over to press headquarters, located in a tavern something like 50 yards directly across from the current headquarters. All class of people. Inside were all class of people mingling in good fellowship. They were all assembled under one common banner, Joe Louis. Newspaper men sat in one corner of the room discussing things. Black and Roxborough circled the place, assuring everyone if they didn't see what they wanted, just ask for it. In a loft upstairs were telegraph wires. Newsmen were coming and going. Suddenly there was a commotion. Everyone rushed for the door. Joe Louis had just roused from his slumber and was ready for his afternoon workout. Joe dressed fully to walk from his room to the gymnasium, which was only 75 yards away. He shook hands along the way, consented to several autographs, looked towards the assembled throng as they cheered, but through it all remained expressionless. Smiles at dog. The only time during the entire day, including his workout inside the ring, Lewis smiled was when the enormous Great Dane dog almost tore down a door to get to him. The dog had barked, whined, and pleaded. Finally, when denied entrance, the dog crashed through the screen. The spirit of destruction seemed to amuse the dark dynamiter from Detroit. He smiled, the first and only smile I have ever seen him cross his deadpan. The dog was given an affectionate pet. The dog was given an affectionate pet. It's some training camp, and no kidding. So it gives you an idea.
You got a great picture of Joe sleeping and in bed.
But there's all this. There's the press headquarters across the street.
Yeah.
Somebody goes, "Joe's awake," and they all flood out. There's newspaper wires running through the ceilings. I've got another huge quote, but I want to save it.
It's a frenzy.
The next quote I have, I'm not going to read it today. We'll read it. We'll start off the next show with it. But the next quote is really shows the craziness, because Joe's like actually sparring and doing this and that, and you can just see the crowd is like oohing and on. He paints an even bigger picture, but I want to save that for the next show because we're actually gonna be leading into the Carnera fight.
Sure.
With the next episode.
So what does his training consist of?
So there, it's kind of like what he did before, like where he's got his road work, he's got his eating, sleeping. It's. I think they kept him on a very similar schedule as he did before.
And how many is he sparring with people?
Yeah, absolutely. He's got
who's he sparring with? Chappie.
I think I have some.
Chappie's a little old to be sparring.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like we're going to talk about that in the quote will be the next quote. We'll kind of talk about it.
All right.
But I can give you a little bit of a teaser. The idea, since you asked, especially, but he's got to bring in. They're trying to find these big bodies to represent.
Yeah,
Carnera.
the tall. Yeah, the tall. Yeah.
And so what they're going to show is, I think it's going to be in the next quote. I think that is in the next one. Maybe it's in another quote. But one of the sort of sad things, and I actually have the quote for it. It might actually be in the training for the bear fight. But there's this quote where the reporter is actually kind of sad because he's watching Joe. I think it's for the bear fight that this quote we're actually gonna read it, because it's almost sickening what Joe does to these sparring partners.
Oh, real okay.
So
these guys are taking a walloping too.
They're not just taking a walloping. They're getting it's bad.
Is it for the I wouldn't say the amusement of the press.
No, not at all. Not at all. This was pure business, and that's what was sad was that all they're doing is bringing in big-bodied guys that have, they're boxers, but these guys have no business being in the ring with Joe Louis.
Right.
But they're just big,
and he's hurting them.
And they're getting, and he's hurting them. And there's one that's where the quote I'm going to read when we get to the Bear section in a few episodes is so it's almost sad because Joe these guys are getting beat up so bad they can't even barely stand.
Wow.
And Joe was going through them so fast that Jack Blackburn's lecturing them I don't care. I want you up on your feet, get your butt in the ring, and give me another half a round.
Right.
Because he can't even. They can't Joe, and Joe is not pulling any punches. Because he can't. He was
game.
He's got to get ready for this fight.
He was fight.
Yeah,
action, not.
That's what's so
he wasn't
sad.
practicing.
Yeah, and I actually wrote about that in the screenplay.
And you gotta. I guess you gotta train at fight capacity or fight level.
Exactly, he can't take it easy.
All right, because
literally they're just punching bags for him. Sure. That's all they are.
Ow.
And that's what I mean. He's got a punching bag, but a punching bag doesn't simulate an actual ring fight. And so that's why,
somebody acting and reacting to it.
Yeah, he needs a big body guy to work out his combinations and work out what he's going to do with a big body fighter. And so that's what's I actually wrote that into the screenplay. It's sort of almost like a tragic scene where there's in the screenplay, man, I don't soften it up. There's blood and gore all over the place, and I got people being sick on the sidelines watching what's going on because it's so. Because that's what that quote conveys is that Jack Blackburn, these guys don't there's actually guys in this scene where they find themselves in the ring and they're getting torn up so bad that they're trying to get out, and Jack Blackburn's no, you're not leaving. We need your big body in there. They can't even find enough guys to allow Joe Louis to pummel them. So because they're chewing up. Basically human freaking punching bags so fast they don't even have the guys to supply, and that's that's in the middle of a Great Depression, and they're trying to get paying good money to come in there and take some punches from Joe Louis, and they can't even find enough bodies.
Wow.
And that's what I mean. That's what's kind of I think that quote's in the Bears section.
Sure.
But it's just but in essence that's what they're doing is that Joe can't pull any punches, and and I think that for him, that's something that's never, rarely, I don't think discussed is, again, we talked about how Joe was this manufactured killer, that's something actually Blackburn said was Joe ain't a natural born killer. He's a manufactured killer. He took credit and I manufactured a killer.
Because a couple of those early fights, he was
almost killed. Oh yeah, no, yeah.
And he went a little slower.
Went a little soft and almost cost him a couple fights. And especially when he was an amateur, there was one fight where it was for the championship of the amateur championship, and he kind of held back on a guy, and then the guy he was ended up having to go to decision or whatever. He won the fight, but it showed one of the issues that he would face and have to break, which was, and that's what Jack Blackburn was so emphatic over is you can't count on the referees. You have got to destroy people.
Right.
You cannot take it easy on anybody, and that includes your sparring partners. And I'm sure he probably had that conversation with them at some point, saying,
"This is gonna hurt."
These guys, their job is to get you ready for this fight. And if you go half, if you go half speed against these guys and take it easy on them, then it'll lead you to be half speed and take it easy on Carnera when you get to the ring.
Hey, fellas, this is going to sting a little, but we need you. We need you to help out Joe.
Yeah. So anyways, this
wow.
So that's what I mean. Like so that's what he's doing. He's doing his raw. I don't have the exact schedule for but I'm sure it was something similar to where he's waking up super early, doing his road work, gets in a big breakfast, takes a nap, like his regular routine that he had when he was going for this, when he was fighting, when he was kind of getting ready for all this. I'm sure they kept him in a fairly, because that routine was working for him. He's demolishing people. He's 19-0 plus 3 other fights that didn't even count on his record. And so he's doing his training. He's these with the little extra excitement from autograph hounds and newspapermen and interviews and stuff. And so so all this is going on right now. Joe's getting ready for Primo Carnera, the biggest fight of his career.
Right.
But there's unfortunately we got to leave off with something sort of negative that happens at this point. Okay,
all right, what happens
because it's a critical component to the overall Joe Louis story.
All right.
So Primo Carnera's fight is June 25th. And the article we just read was June 22nd. So prior to both of these events, on June 13th, Max Baer is going to lose his championship to James Braddock. Oh. And so there's a movie called Cinderella Man.
Yeah.
Cinderella Man, it's a Ron Howard directed movie. It's like $100 million Hollywood movie. It stars Russell Crowe as James Braddock.
Colleen and I just watched it last week.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Okay. So that fight happens right now.
Oh, wow.
That fight happens now. And the reason why that is so significant is because the plan that they had outlined for Joe was that he was going to beat Primo Carnera, who was the guy who Max Baer had beaten for the championship belt, which was going to lead Joe to a shot at the heavyweight belt with Max Baer at the end of the year. So Joe would finish off this this incredible year as the heavyweight champion of the world.
But that shifts the whole timeline.
Now it shifts. It all changes because now Max Baer, he's still scheduled to face Baer. He's still got to fight Baer. But now Baer is no longer the heavyweight champion.
Right.
And what's even worse than that is that James Braddock is under club control by the Madison Square Garden. So there's no way the Madison Square Garden are going to give a fight to Mike Jacobs, who's coming for their, he's already taken their publicity from him with the Hearst newspapers, and Mike Jacobs is breathing down Jimmy Johnson's neck to run Madison Square Garden. He's becoming this major promoter, and the other thing too is that now the Garden, having James Braddock under contractual obligation, they control the belt. So they don't have to give Joe Louis a chance. They can just keep running heavyweight championship fights in the Madison Square Garden, and Joe Louis is just, as far as they're concerned, just an exhibition fighter.
Right.
He ain't had nothing to do with the Garden.
Right.
So now, because Max Baer, I think that Max Baer also had a contract with the Garden, but this was like one of the last fights, which actually kind of makes me wonder about whether or not this was, I don't like to even, just even say it out loud, but it's just, I think that this was,
how that belt
it's just crazy
hands.
how it's just all of a sudden that, Braddock has just got this belt and the Madison Square Garden controls, and I don't even want to suggest that's what happened because I'm a huge fan of Max Baer and I would not want to go down that road, but what
things that make you go,
Yeah, but in either case, now the Garden is in control of the belt. And so, and by the way, it was a decision. So it doesn't mean, I'm not even suggesting that Baer threw it. I'm saying there might have been something that went along the idea that the judges, leaned, heavily a point favorite towards Braddock or something. Because it wasn't even it's not like he got, Baer took a dive or something because he didn't get knocked out. He lost the belt on points.
Oh, it was a decision?
It was a decision,
oh,
yeah.
That's
what I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to lay this on Baer's lap.
No.
I'm
if it was down to a decision.
That there's,
I call shenanigans big time.
It could be, yeah. So, and that's what I mean. So this is the situation is that now Louis, and so now, this is another moment that I wrote in the screenplay was that, there's this moment that Joe's, they're like, because this isn't just as simple as, Max Baer's, after Max Baer, we're going to go face James Braddock for the belt. No, it's going to be like actually getting a chance at the heavyweight championship now.
It's a whole nother.
It's a whole nother story. This is a story we could do 10 episodes on how Joe got his chance. I mean, he's not going to end up winning.
How you get from here to there?
He's not even going to get his chance at the heavyweight championship till 1937.
Whoa.
He's not even going to get a chance at it. And so that's what I mean. Like, it's going to be 2 more years. That's the kind of politicking they had to go on.
You can just see that, like, he's up in the ring, training, and the throngs of people around him. And somebody comes up and says in his ears that Bear lost the belt.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I have a scene. I have an actual scene from the. I actually wrote a scene into the movie about them finding out and how dejected they were. I don't have any. There's nobody that knows that story about. I mean, maybe there is. I've maybe Joe Jr. knows something about it, at that moment. But I actually wrote into the screenplay that it was Joe. That these people are all dejected and they're all in the house in Pompton Lakes and they're like, what are we gonna what are we doing now? And then Joe is the one that's like, nothing changes. We're just gonna keep winning and fighting and beating people. And so that's how I wrote it into the movie, was that Joe himself is the guy that's actually breaks that. And like in the screenplay, Joe does very little talking. That's how I wrote the character. But when he does talk, it carries like gravitas. When he does talk, it's always at a moment that's like. Like that. That it's just a big moment, and then like they're not like surprised that Joe said something, but they're just. But whenever he does talk, like it just carries he's extra weight because he is so quiet. Yeah. And so anyways, it's a now he's got there's no chance for him in essence to win the heavyweight championship in 1935, even though he emerges as the premier fighter.
Sure.
You see, so that's what I mean. So this so that is the sort of a downside to this particular story component, but
crazy business. All right, so we'll be back with more, right? Episode 46
Absolutely.
is
46
next,
is on,
and
46 on deck.
We're gonna see how that fight turns out. How's he handle the big guy, and we'll get to all of that. Like, subscribe, collect, leave a comment wherever your fine podcasts are sold. We appreciate you being along with us, and till next time, put 'em up.